Let's begin with the most dramatic turn yet in the aviation saga. Today, a Lagos court struck out the 5-count charges against Comfort Emmanson. Police withdraw the case following new facts, and she's now free. Ibom Air has also withdrawn its complaint, and Airline Operators of Nigeria, we understand, will lift her lifetime ban. In the Value Jet saga, KWAM 1's flight ban has been reduced to 1 month and is now to become an aviation security protocol ambassador. The suspended pilots, we understand, will return after a month of reappraisal. The aviation minister calls it compassionate, but critics say it raises fresh questions about fairness, due process, and industry accountability. My first guest is Babajide Awopetu, a branding and strategy expert, and will explore what these sudden reversals mean for public trust, sector reputation, as well as leadership credibility in Nigeria's aviation industry. Mr. Awopetu, thank you for joining us. You followed this story from the start. Comfort Emmanson has now been freed after Ibom Air withdrew its complaint and AON lifted the lifetime ban. What do you make of this sudden turnaround?
Yeah, I think the sudden turnaround clearly has caught people off guard, and it's a little bit surprising. In an environment where it's very important that the country is rebuilding its image and trying to portray due process and a standard of accountability across the board, I can understand the initial view that when people see the reversal, that it seemed like a sudden climb down, and it can give the impression that this due process and standard and guidance is not applying across the board. And so it can raise concern. And remember that incidents around airports and flight and airline, they actually have particular capacity to not only have impacts within the country itself, but also internationally by the nature of it. So I do think that it's one that the concern that it raises is understandable in both scenarios.
Mr. Awopetu, the big question has been, how does the sight of a passenger in prison for days over an in-flight altercation and then suddenly freed really affect the public sense of fairness in airline operations? Because last week, KWAM 1 was accused of behavior the minister himself said was akin to holding an aircraft hostage. Now is set to be an aviation security protocol ambassador. From a brand strategy lens, how risky is it to turn a recent offender into a face of compliance?
So I think that on the one hand, you could look at it and say that maybe there was a little bit of overreach in terms of the reaction and the initial judgment and maybe punishment that was dished out. But you could also say that maybe there is a need to just demonstrate that there are standards of expectation of what's expected from individuals when they're in that kind of public realm. Now, in terms of the turnaround and using KWAM as an ambassador, I think that there's a sense of potential maturity about that there's compromise, that there is compassion, and with due apology and turning this negative into a positive, maybe it's not the worst possible outcome, in the sense that actually it can be a way of showing that when mistakes are made, when we make errors, that there is a way to make up for it, to compensate for it, and to try to turn it around and project a positive image. I think what's going to be most important now is going forward that the ambassadorial role is done in a way that really reinforces the point about standard, consistency, policy, and ensuring that we follow guidance at all times.
You know, the minister seemed to have framed this as compassionate, which is understandable, because prior to the Ibom Air incident, people were saying to air is human. But in brand terms, how dangerous is it when disciplinary processes appear ad hoc or even influenced by public sentiment?
If it appears ad hoc or is influenced by personality, I think that can be problematic because ultimately we want to make sure that all passengers are treated in the same way. Having said that, though, I do think that if the accommodation that's been made is such that it is allowing the personality, in this case, KWAM, to use their public image in a positive way to reinforce some of the key messages about the need to follow guidance, to stick with the rule of law. And if that's done successfully in that way, I think it could be a good save in terms of turning the situation around. Because we do need to reinforce this point that the rule of law applies, consistency, and that there are not impartiality in terms of the way treatment is done based on individuals' profile. But having said all of that, I think that it does have the possibility to be turned around and to become a positive.
Ibom Air is now facing backlash over the viral stripping video. How does this affect how we're perceived globally?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it seems like the errors were made on numerous sides from what we are able to observe. But I think that the viral stripping video piece was particularly distasteful, regardless of what had occurred. I think that the way that was managed was not best, and I think that there would need to be some reparation to be done to just ensure that customers' confidence are brought back in line, because clearly that does not fill customers with confidence, regardless of the incident that had occurred. And I think it's a good example that sometimes in scenarios like this, even when things go wrong, that the way we react to it and the way we manage it still presents an opportunity, which can still turn out to be a negative or positive, depending on how we react.
We saw the Airline Operators of Nigeria slamming the young lady with perhaps the biggest penalty we've seen yet, a lifetime ban, both domestically and internationally. With new evidence, it's beginning to look like they actually became judge and jury in their own court. How can it recover from the perception of overreach now?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the perception of overreach is clear, and it is clear that from what we can observe, that does seem like there was a bit of an overreach there. But what I would say is that the process of recovery starts with correcting the error, and it appears that there's been a bit of a climb down around that, and let's say that common sense has come into play and a better balance has been found in terms of the punishment for what has occurred. And I think from Airline, I presume that they would look into the process of how they arrived at some of these judgments and really reconsider, so that future scenarios, we don't have scenarios like this, because as I said, these are some of the situations that do go viral, and they do not only have an impact on the airline industry or the particular airlines in concern, but also the country as a whole, and in terms of how we're perceived. And it didn't come across very well. But at least let's say that let's give some credit that in a reasonably short period of time, albeit under some pressure, that there's been some redress in this situation.
Comfort appears to have gotten some comfort now, at least out of Kirikiri. The videos we're seeing show a lady who is grateful to be out. Perhaps time will tell whether she decides to sue Ibom Air, and how that also would turn the narrative on its head eventually. But the minister has ordered a sector-wide retreat for aviation security and airline staff. Perhaps time will also help us see the branding opportunities and pitfalls that that making it public might really imply or impact on the sector widely. But if you were advising NCAA, FAN, and perhaps AON right now, what's the single most important step you think they should take to rebuild confidence in Nigeria's aviation sector?
Well, I think that definitely one thing is that in a scenario like this, attention has been brought to these incidents, and it means that they have the attention of the public on this topic. And there's an opportunity to then to use that attention to promote to promote the fact that they have solid, clear guidelines, that there's consistency, and to promote good practice and behaviors to all stakeholders who participate in this process. You know, sometimes when things don't go according to plan, as has been the case in the situations that we're discussing, it also offers an opportunity to use that scenario to tell, to push the positive agenda about how we want to be behaving, operating, how we want to deal with scenarios when things go wrong, and to just find a better balance in terms of reaction so there doesn't appear to be any kind of chaotic flip-flopping in terms of retribution for what's perceived to have gone wrong.
I guess time will tell what this means for the flying public and the relationship that will now exist between crew and passengers. Let's hope that everyone has learned their lessons, but time will tell. But thank you so much for your contribution. Babajide Awopetu, branding and strategy expert. Good to hear from you.
Thank you. It's been a